Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. Today I want to talk about data privacy, the EU, and the EU Directive on Collective Redress. Last year, the EU passed this directive on collective redress, which will be incorporated or should be incorporated into the national laws of EU member states within the next 2 years. So the purpose of this particular directive is to make it easier for member states to join into collective, or like we call in the US, sort of class action lawsuits, especially as they relate to big companies where users across the block are using, these big tech companies. So this is just about, combining types of court cases, but people are really concerned about how this is going to impact cases related to data privacy and how individuals can get their type of redress, especially financial redress, in these types of cases. So, for example, under the GDPR in Europe, the supervisory authorities can have fines for companies, but those fines go back to the EU or member states. The money does not go back to individuals. So people are thinking that having this particular collective redress law will allow member states, again, to be able to combine forces and have possibly like consumer rights groups to help combine people into cases so that they can get some type of redress. As we're seeing, or as I've heard people talk about, the people in Europe have been watching very closely, seeing how class action lawsuits have been happening in the US and how they're getting paid out for certain things. So an example of this is the BIPA case that Facebook settled last year. They got paid out this year, which was $650 million. And a lot of people in the EU, when they look at this redress law, they're thinking, Facebook may have done the same thing in Europe, but they didn't have the capacity to do cases in this way, and also to be able to have redress for individuals. One thing about this particular directive, and as is the case with some lawsuits in the EU, they have a loser pays cost part. So they think that this will help to curb possibly frivolous lawsuits, or possibly law firms creating these big class action or big collective redress cases without any sort of meat on them. So it's going to remain to be seen how this is going to happen. I'm already seeing companies or firms trying to ready cases that have this particular feature in terms of collective redress, and then also individuals may want to gain information or gain some type of financial settlement as a result of some of these cases. So it's going to be interesting. I know that the EU is looking very closely at the US, and the US in turn is looking very closely at the EU to see how a lot of these cases turn out. Thank you.